My name is Thomas Webb. I was 11 when I first heard the knocking beneath the floorboards of Saint Ives Home for boys. It was 1888, and I'd lived in that place since I was 5. Saint Ives was no home, not truly. It was cold even in summer, and everything, the porridge, the light, the affection, was thin. The rules were stricter than scripture, and punishment came fast. 53 of us shared the dormitory, lying in iron beds like silent goods stacked in a warehouse. After lights out, we didn't speak. We didn't ask questions, especially not about the boys who vanished. And we never, ever went near the basement. That was the thing. It wasn't forbidden. No rules posted, no warnings barked. It was worse than that. It was ignored, utterly, deliberately ignored, as if speaking of it might wake it. The stairwell behind the boiler, the rusted lock, the way the air tasted like old coins when you got too close. It was invisible to the grown-ups. But we knew. Every boy knew. Something lived down there. It watched. It waited. Harold heard it first. 3 soft knocks from under his bed, just after midnight. He told us the next morning, whispering through clenched teeth, pale and sweaty. We laughed. Nervous laughter. Not real. The kind that keeps the dark at bay. But then it happened again. And again. Always 3 knocks. Always under a different bed. And then Benny disappeared. I remember that night. The knocks came from beneath his bed. He didn't cry out. None of us ever did. By morning, Benny was gone. The bed made up, boots neatly placed, no questions asked. His name was never spoken again. That's when I began to write things down. I found an old almanac in the laundry room, tucked it into the vent, and began recording dates, names, and knocks. Patterns started to form. It was never random. It was waiting, choosing. The staff didn't care, or pretended not to notice. But then a new supervisor arrived, Mr. Carruthers. Tall, nervous, and too kind for a place like this. He didn't shout, didn't strike. He asked questions, quiet ones, and he listened even when no one spoke. He watched us at meals, pacing the halls at night, always stopping near the boiler room, as if something pulled him there. His hands trembled when he thought no one saw. 3 weeks after he arrived, another boy, Evan, vanished. Just like Benny. Just like Harold. But Mr. Carruthers didn't look away. He did something no adult had ever done. He gathered us in the chapel and asked, "Has anyone heard knocking?" Silence followed, heavy and strange. No one answered. We were terrified. I was terrified. But that night I saw him walk down the hall to the locked door behind the boiler. I followed, unseen. He knelt, pressed his ear to the wood, and flinched like something had whispered into his very bones. That night, the knocking returned. Only this time, it didn't stop at 3. The knocking didn't stop at 3. It came in bursts, 5, then 7, then 12, each louder, closer, as if something was crawling upward through the very bones of the building. We didn't sleep. None of us dared. We lay stiff in our beds, sheets clutched like shields, ears straining through the silence for the next knock. And when it came, always from a new place, it rattled more than the floorboards. It rattled our minds. The next morning, Mr. Carruthers summoned the groundskeeper. He spoke calmly, as if ordering a delivery, and told him to bring bolt cutters and a crowbar. By noon, half the staff had gathered at the stairwell behind the boiler. We crowded on the upper landings, peering down, breathless. The old lock, untouched for decades, gave way with a shriek that made several boys flinch. Then the door creaked open, exhaling something ancient. The air that spilled out wasn't just cold. It was wet and heavy, like a living breath exhaled too long ago. It reeked of damp earth, mold, and copper. A few boys turned away, gagging. Mr. Carruthers didn't. He lit a lantern, adjusted his coat, and stepped inside. He didn't ask for help, didn't hesitate, just vanished into the dark. And the door stayed open. That was the first mistake. Hours passed. The staff grew restless. Some whispered about sealing the door again. Others argued for calling the constable. But no one followed. They were afraid. We all were. By dusk, Mr. Carruthers had not returned, and I knew someone had to. I waited until lights out, wrapped my blanket around my shoulders like a cloak, slipped the brass crucifix from under my mattress into my pocket. I told myself it wasn't bravery. It was habit. I'd learned to watch, to hide, to slip through cracks no one noticed. That's how you survived at Saint Ives. The stairs behind the door were older than the rest of the building, crude stone, slick with moss. Each step groaned beneath my weight like it remembered heavier feet long gone. The lantern he'd taken sat burning near the bottom, its light casting sickly shadows on the walls. That's when I saw them. Footprints, barefoot, small, leading away from the lantern. I followed. The corridor they led me into was wrong. Too narrow, too low. The walls pressed in, sweating cold moisture. Doors lined the hallway, iron doors, thin and bolted from the outside, too small for adults, and everyone bore deep scratches around the frame, as if something inside had tried, once, to get out. At the very end of the corridor, one door stood slightly ajar. From the darkness beyond, a voice called. Not Mr. Carruthers, not a child. Something else. It said my name. I should have run. I didn't. I pushed the door open. And what I saw on the other side didn't belong in this world. The room beyond the door was wrong. The walls weren't made of stone like the rest of the orphanage. These pulsed, black and slick, as if breathing in and out with the rhythm of something asleep. The air was thick, stinging my eyes and tongue, heavy with the scent of sour milk and copper. My knees trembled. My fingers clenched the crucifix so hard, the edges cut into my palm. In the center of the room was a circle burned into the floor. Not drawn, not painted, burned. The soot was old, but the scent still clung like it had never cooled. Symbols surrounded it, jagged, spiraled, shifting even when I didn't blink. Inside the circle crouched a figure. At first I thought it was a child. Thin. Still. Facing the corner like it had been punished. But the proportions were wrong. Arms too long, limbs folded in on themselves, like something trying to remember how a body should fit. The skin was grey, or maybe no skin at all. Just layers of something stretched thin over emptiness. It didn't move, and then someone else stepped into the circle. Not Mr. Carruthers. This man was older, dressed in black robes faded with time. I recognized his face from a faded photograph I'd once found, tucked in the back of the chapel ledgers. Anselm Thorne. He'd supposedly died decades ago, but he moved with purpose, like he'd never left. He knelt beside the thing and whispered a name. It wasn't in any language I knew. The sound was thick, crawling, like the taste of ash. The thing twitched. Slowly, it began to turn. It didn't rise all at once. First a shift, then a crack, bone or something worse. Then, inch by inch, it stood. Taller than any man. Its head scraped the ceiling, and I heard something fall. Plaster, or maybe a piece of the world peeling back. Its face was a blank stretch of shadow, but it turned toward Mr. Thorne. He raised a hand, palm shaking, and spoke again. "You were promised silence." The thing responded, and you broke it. Its voice wasn't a voice. It was pressure, like a sound you hear inside your bones before your ears catch up. My body screamed to run, but my legs stayed locked. Then I felt heat, intense, sudden, coming from the crucifix in my hand. That broke the spell. I turned and fled, sprinting down the corridor, barely avoiding the rusted door as it slammed shut behind me. I heard the scream, not of a man, but of something being torn apart, and something else being let loose. Some of the others were already in the hallway, girls from the southern wing, eyes wide with terror. We didn't speak, we ran. We didn't all make it out, and when we did, the door was sealed again. Not by us, there was no lock, no hinges, just stone, as if it had never opened at all. They told me I'd been adopted. That was the story the nuns gave when I left St. Ives the following spring. I remember the lie clearly, how they smiled too much, how their hands trembled while stuffing my belongings into a suitcase I didn't recognize. No one ever asked about Mr. Carruthers again. No one asked about the others who never came back from the stairwell. But I remember. The orphanage was shuttered that winter. The official reason? Fire. But there was no fire. Not the kind that leaves ash and embers. The building stood untouched, rotting behind rusted gates, the basement door bricked over from the outside like a grave. They sealed it in silence, because they were afraid it would answer. The memories followed me. I grew, yes, but I never escaped it. I saw the circle scorched into the floor whenever I closed my eyes. I heard the thing's voice in my dreams. Not words, not warnings, just pressure, like the weight of something watching through the cracks in reality. And always the knocking. 3 times. Under my bed. A warning. Or a greeting. I never answered. Years passed. I learned to keep silent like the adults had taught me. I smiled when spoken to. I worked in the post office. I married, briefly. It didn't last. I couldn't sleep beside someone else, not with the knocking. I told no one. What could I say? That there was a creature older than God, buried in the bones of a broken orphanage. That I had seen it rise? That I still feared it would come for me? Number. It stayed with me, quietly, until last week. That's when I began hearing the voice again. Only now, it doesn't come in dreams. It comes from the walls. The knocking has returned, louder, closer, and something else, something new. It speaks my name, just like it did that night in the basement. But now it says more. It says, "You remember," and so do I. So I've written this, not as a confession, and not as a warning, because warnings are useless when the thing you fear already knows your name. I write this so someone, somewhere, might understand when the cracks return, when the ground opens again. Because it will. Places like St. Ives don't die. They wait. I sit now in my room, an old man, the crucifix clutched in one hand, a candle in the other. The house is silent. But beneath the floor, I hear it. 3 knocks, then 4, then silence. I do not check. I do not breathe, because I remember what was behind that door, and I know it remembers me.